There is a way to fish for carp that does something almost no other way can do. It sets the hook for you. You do not have to stare at the water every second. You do not have to guess the right moment to strike. You cast it out, you rest the rod down, and you wait. And when a carp comes along and makes its one small mistake, the trap springs all by itself, and that rod tip pulls round so hard it nearly leaves the rest. It is called the method feeder, and on a water that holds a good head of carp, there is no faster, no steadier, no more reliable way to put one fish on the bank after another. I am not going to bury you in gadgets and jargon today. I am going to give you the whole thing in 5 plain steps. Why it works and when to use it. How to build the simple rig. What to load it with, and how to mix it right. What tackle you actually need, and none that you don't. And last, how to find the spot and fish it so accurately that you draw the carp in and hold them there all day. Follow these 5 steps, and you will catch more fish. That is a promise. So stay with me, because each one builds on the last. Let us start with the first step, and it is the one most folks skip. Understanding what this thing actually does, and when to reach for it. The method feeder is a small weight with a cage or a frame around it, and it threads right onto your line. You pack your loose feed around that frame, you tuck your hook bait in tight against it, and you cast the whole parcel out as one. It sinks to the bottom, and there it sits, and slowly the feed softens and breaks away, leaving a neat little mound of food on the lake bed with your hook bait sitting right in the middle of it. And here is the heart of why it works so well. The part a beginner never stops to consider. Your hook is joined to that feeder by a very short link, just a few inches of line. So when a carp moves in to hoover up that little pile of free food, your hook bait is right there among it. And the moment the fish sucks it in and tries to move off, that short link comes tight against the heavy feeder in an instant, and the hook drives home on its own. The fish hooks itself against the weight before it even knows something is wrong. That is the whole magic of the method. It turns a gentle, careful feeder into a self-setting trap. But a wise angler knows that no single method is right for every day. And this is where the first step earns its keep. The method feeder is a bottom bait. It shines when the carp are down low, rooting along the bed, which they do most of the time, especially when the water is colored and murky, and you cannot see a thing beneath the surface. Colored water and no fish showing on top is almost a signal on its own. It tells you the carp are down where the feeder lies. But if you walk up to the water and see carp cruising along the top, their backs breaking the surface, basking in the warm upper layer, then put the feeder down and leave it. On a day like that, the fish are looking up, not down, and you would do far better floating a bit of bread or a dog biscuit on the surface right in front of their noses. Read the water first. Match the method to where the fish are. That is step 1, and it will save you many a wasted afternoon. And let the calendar and the sky guide you too. The method truly comes into its own in the warmer half of the year, from late spring right through summer, and into the first cool of autumn, when the carp are feeding hard and moving over the bottom hunting for food. The low light of early morning and the last hour before dark are the finest times of all, and a warm, gray, overcast day can fish well from dawn to dusk. In the deep cold of winter, when the fish go quiet and barely feed, the method slows right down with them, and you must fish smaller baits and far more patiently, or wait for a milder spell to come along. Fish it when the water is warming and the carp are hungry, and half your work is already done for you. Now that you know what it does and when to use it, let us move to the second step and build the rig, because it is simpler than the tackle shops would ever let you believe. You need only a handful of things. The feeder itself, and start with a small to middling size, heavy enough to cast and to do its hooking job, but not so heavy it crashes down and scares the swim. A short length of line for your hook link, a strong, sharp hook, and your bait. That is nearly all of it. You thread your main line down through the middle of the feeder, so the feeder can slide, and you stop it with a swivel or a small bead at the bottom end. To that same point you join your hook link, and here is the thing to burn into your memory. Keep that hook link short, just 3 to 5 inches. Longer, and your bait wanders away from the feed, and the trap loses its bite. Short, and your hook bait sits dead in the middle of the food, and the fish hooks itself the instant it lifts the bait. Short is the whole secret. Do not let anyone talk you out of it. On the end of that short link, you tie your hook, and you tie it the best way there is, the way that turns pickups into fish, which is the hair rig. You do not bury the hook inside the bait. Instead, you leave a tiny loop of line, a hair, hanging just off the back of the hook, and your bait sits on that hair below a clean, bare hook. 2 grains of corn on a hair below the hook is a perfect method bait. Now when the carp sucks in that bait, there is nothing hard hidden inside it to feel wrong. So the fish takes it with full trust, and the bare hook slides straight into the lip and holds. If you have never tied a hair rig, it is worth an evening at the kitchen table to learn, because it is the single biggest step up in your hooking there is. And corn is far from your only choice on that hair. A soft hook pellet, the same as your feed, a small boilie, a pinch of bread flake, all sit beautifully on a hair below the hook. Many a good angler slides on 1 real grain of corn and 1 grain of the fake, floating kind. So the bait sits up proud off the bottom and stands out among the rest. But the one rule that never changes is this. Make your hook bait look like the free food around it. If your feeder is throwing out pellet, hook a pellet. If it is throwing out corn, hook corn. You want your trap to be the most natural, looking mouthful in that whole little pile, so the fish takes it without a flicker of doubt. As for the hook itself, a strong, sharp pattern in a middling size, something around a size 10 or 12, suits most method baits well. And run the point across your thumbnail before every session, because a blunt hook is the quiet thief that steals the fish of the day. One more choice, and then your rig is done. You can set it as a bolt rig fixed, so the fish slams straight into the full weight of the feeder, which hits hard and hooks hard. Or you can set it to run, letting the line slide freely through the feeder when a fish picks up, which shows you a cleaner bite and lets you swap hook links in a moment. Both catch fish. Start with whichever feels simpler to you. And you can always change later once you have a feel for it. And do yourself a kindness before you ever leave the house. Tie 2 or 3 of these hook links at home, at the kitchen table where the light is good and your hands are steady, and wind them round a scrap of foam to keep them neat. Then if you lose one to a snag or a big stubborn fish out on the bank, you are baited up and casting again in seconds, instead of squinting at tiny knots by the water while the carp feed away right in front of you. So the rig is built. Now for the third step, and this is where a lot of good anglers quietly lose fish. What you pack onto that feeder, and how you mix it. You have choices. Fine breadcrumb, a proper ground bait, or small softened pellet all work. But not just any bag off the shelf. You want a feed made for this job. One that will cling to the feeder long enough to fly through the air and hit the water, and then let go and break down into that soft mound on the bottom. Some ground baits are made dry and fluffy for other kinds of fishing, and they will fall off your feeder before it ever lands. So look for feed meant for the method, something that binds. That one detail matters more than the brand on the bag. Mixing it is a small art, and here is how to get it right every time. Tip your dry feed into a round tub, not a square one, because the round shape lets you turn it over evenly with no dry corners left hiding. Then add your water a little at a time, and this is the golden rule. A little at a time, stirring between each splash. You can always add more water. You can never take it back out. Keep going until the mix just holds together when you squeeze a handful, and then stop. In fact, wet it a touch more than you think you need, because over the next 15 or 20 minutes it will drink that water in and firm up to just right. Too dry, and it will not stick to the feeder, and you will be crushing it on in frustration. Too wet and sloppy, and it will cling like glue and never break down in the water, and your feed never reaches the fish. You are aiming for the middle. Sticks on firm, let's go clean. And on a hot day, when the sun starts drying your mix out through the afternoon, just sprinkle a little more water on and bring it back to life. And here is a small thing that makes a big difference. Do not let your feed be plain and lifeless. Stir a few grains of corn, a little hemp, or some chopped up bits of your hook bait right into the mix, so that when it breaks down there are proper mouthfuls in the mound for the carp to hunt out. Better still, match the color and the smell of your feed to the bait on your hook, so your hook bait looks and smells like just one more piece of the free meal, not the odd one out. A splash of sweetener or a little color stirred into the water you mix with costs next to nothing, and it can turn a quiet feeder into a busy one. To load it, you can simply press a handful around the feeder in your palm and tuck your hook bait in. And for fishing close in, that is perfectly good. But if you want to cast a long way and land in the same spot every single time, use a little mold. Because a feeder packed in a mold comes out the same weight and the same shape on every cast, and that flies true and lands true. And whether you tuck your hook bait down inside the ball of feed or leave it hanging just outside, I will tell you what I prefer. Tuck it inside. It cannot tangle on the cast that way, and when the fish are feeding hard on that mound, a bait sitting right in the heart of it gets taken quickest of all. That is your feed sorted. Now the fourth step, and a short one, because the method feeder does not ask for much tackle, and you should not let anyone sell you more than you need. You want a rod with a bit of backbone. A feeder rod of around 10 to 12 feet is ideal. 10 if you are fishing close, 12 if you need to reach right across a bigger water. Do not go too soft and whippy, because you will be casting a fair weight over and over all day, and a rod with some poke in it makes that easy and accurate. For your line, do not go too light. Around 8 pounds is a good honest choice, because method feeder line takes a beating, cast after cast, fish after fish, and a light line will let you down at the worst moment. The reel hardly matters, so long as it is reliable and holds enough of that line. And then just a few simple things on the bank. A bank stick with a rest for your rod, set out to the side of you at an angle, so your rod sits still and steady and pointing at your spot, and you can watch that tip without holding it all day. A good big landing net, because you never lift a carp out on the line alone. And something soft and wet to rest the fish on while you slip the hook out. That is a full method feeder kit. Corn money, not a king's ransom. Which brings us to the fifth step, and this is the one that separates the man who catches a fish or two from the man who fills his net. It is all about the spot, and about hitting it again and again and again. First, choose your spot with your eyes, not just by chucking it out anywhere. Carp gather near things. Look for an overhanging tree trailing its branches in the water, a bed of reeds, a patch of lily pads, the edge of a weed bed, an island, or the quiet margin tight under your own bank. Anywhere a fish can feel safe and find food, and watch the water as you set up, because a carp that rolls or jumps or sends up a cloud of colored water has just told you exactly where to cast. Pick one good spot and commit to it. Then, and this is the whole game, hit that same spot on every single cast. Remember, the feeder only carries a small amount of feed each time. So if you scatter your casts about here and there, you never build anything. But if you drop it on the same patch, cast after cast, you are laying down more and more feed in one place, until you have built a proper table of food on the bottom that pulls the carp in from all over the lake and holds them there, feeding, right on top of your hook. That is why accuracy is not a nicety with the method. It is the whole point. And here is the rhythm that builds that table fastest, the very heartbeat of method feeder fishing. Little and often. Do not cast out once and then sit there for an hour hoping. If you have not had a bite in a few minutes, wind in, load the feeder fresh, and drop it straight back onto the same spot. Every single cast lays down another small helping of feed, so the more often you cast in those early stages, the quicker your bed of food grows and the sooner the carp come marching in. In the first hour especially, keep it moving. Cast, wait a few minutes, recast, again and again, ringing that dinner bell over and over until the fish simply cannot ignore it. And once the bites start to come, the fish themselves are telling you the swim is built, and you can ease into a steadier rhythm. There is a simple way to be accurate every time, and it costs nothing. For your direction, pick a marker on the far bank, a tree, a post, anything, and cast at it every time so your line always goes out the same way. And for your distance, use the little clip on your reel. Once you have found your range, trap the line in that clip, and now the exact same length of line peels off on every cast, and your feeder drops in the very same place, over and over. Just one word of care with that clip. When you cast into it, keep the rod up high, and let the rod bend soak up the shock as the line hits the clip, so you never crack off. And the moment your feeder lands, drop the rod onto the rest and wind down a couple of turns onto the reel. That little bit of slack gives you a heartbeat to flick the line out of the clip if a big fish bolts and tears off, so it cannot smash you up. Now set that rod on the rest, pointing at your spot, and put just the smallest bend into the tip, the gentlest curve. That little bend is your bite alarm. Watch it. If a fish picks up your bait and swims off away from you, that tip will pull down and round hard. If a fish takes it and comes toward you, that tip will suddenly spring back and fall slack. Either way, the tip is talking to you, and either way, it is time to lift into the fish. And when you do not rip the rod back like you are trying to take its head off. Lift firm and smooth and let that sharp hook, already half set by the feeder, find its hold. Then keep the rod up, let the carp run against the reel when it wants to, stay patient, and draw it over the net. And when that carp is beaten and lying safe in the mesh, treat it with the respect it has earned. Wet your hands before you lay a finger on it, always, so you do not rub away the slime that protects it. Rest it on that wet mat and slip the hook out gently, and from a hair rig it usually falls straight out of the lip. If you want a photograph, keep the fish low over the mat, hold its whole weight in 2 wet hands, and be quick. Then lower it back and hold it upright in the water until it kicks hard and swims off strong under its own power. You have taken nothing from the lake but a good memory, and left a fine fish for the next man, and for yourself next season. One small thing while you are catching, and it matters. Once your feeder is down and you are tightening up to it, do it gently. Do not drag it across the bottom, because you will smear your careful little bed of feed all over the lake and undo your own good work. Tighten just enough to put that bend in the tip, and no more. Keep hitting the same spot, keep the feed going in, and you will feel the swim come alive under you. It is slow at first. The first bite can take a while, but as that bed of food builds, the bites come quicker and quicker, until you can hardly get your bait back out before the next fish is on. That is the method feeder working exactly as it should. And when the bites do slow down, as sooner or later they will, do not just sit there growing roots. A carp swim is a living thing, and small changes wake it back up. Try a different hook bait, a brighter one, or a single grain where you had 2. Rest the spot for 10 quiet minutes and then feed it again. Or simply keep those fresh feeders going in to draw a new wave of fish over your baited patch. 9 times out of 10, one small change is all it takes to pull that rod tip back round. Before I send you off, let me spare you the handful of mistakes that cost most anglers their fish, because knowing them is half of avoiding them. The first is burying the hook point deep inside the bait, where it can never bite. Leave that point clean and proud on its hair. The second is drowning the swim in feed, So the carp fill their bellies on the free food and never need your hook. Feed enough to interest them, never enough to stuff them. The third is a feed mixed wrong, too dry to stick or too wet to break down. Get that one thing right and half your battle is already won. The fourth is spraying your casts all over the swim, instead of onto one tight spot, so no bed of food ever builds. And the last and the most common of all is giving up too soon. The method starts slow and builds. The man who packs away his rod after a quiet first hour walks off just as the swim was coming alive under him. Be the man who waits. Let me give you the whole of it now, said Plain, so it is clear in your mind when you reach the water. Read the water, and fish the method when the carp are down low and out of sight, not when they are basking up top. Build a simple rig with a short hook link and a hair-rigged bait. Mix a feed that sticks on but breaks down clean, and tuck your hook bait right inside it. Keep your tackle plain and strong. And above all, find one good spot and hit it every single cast until you have built a table the carp cannot resist. Do those 5 things, and you will not just catch a carp. You will catch them until your arms are tired. Now, everything I have shown you today puts the odds firmly in your favor. But there is one more trick, one small change to what you feed and how you feed it, that the best match anglers use to catch 2 and 3 times what everyone else on the lake is catching on the very same water on the very same day. It is the difference between a good session and an unforgettable one, and hardly anyone talks about it. That is where I will take you next. Stay with me, and I will show you exactly how it is done.